Well, there we go. We're live. Kirralie Smith, welcome to the first episode of Dean McCrae's Fearless Uncut Conversations. I'm going to be hosting this little series for as long as it takes to, save Australia, or certainly doing whatever we need to do. But obviously, I do a lot of short form content. I do a lot of 2, 3, 4, 5 minute videos that are sort of generating a little bit of interest. And I thought, well, if I can utilize this little platform that I'm building and share it with other people who deserve as much spotlight for their what I consider to be heroics in this country, I'm going to try and do a little bit of that. And obviously tonight this afternoon, Kirralie Smith of Binary, who is absolutely a world-class champion. And I've made a couple of my 2 or 3 minute rant videos in support of Kirralie, and I really appreciate you being guest number 1 on this little platform.
Oh, it's a real honour. Thanks for having me, Dean.
Mate, you have set some records, created some interesting circumstances. Well, you haven't created them. You've stood extremely strong and extremely firm on some things that I would have to agree are complete and utter bullshit. And feel free to use whatever language you feel is appropriate. I'm not afraid of being censored whatsoever in this throughout this process. But look, you've been an advocate for a lot of things over the years. Like, this isn't your first rodeo. You've always championed Australia and family values and some things that I think are pretty important. I've agreed with you on, I reckon, about 99% of everything. There's a few things where I go, oh, well, I'm probably not that hardcore on that, or vice versa. But I also don't believe that it's right to agree wholeheartedly with everybody on everything. Otherwise, there's something seriously wrong with you. But mate, how'd you get into this position? How'd you become such a powerful advocate for, I think, women's rights in particularly, but women's rights, family rights, and by default, actual male rights, men's rights as well?
Look, I'm very much an accidental activist, Dean, and it started back in 2011. It's a long story, but the short story is that I accidentally uncovered some fraudulent halal certification schemes, and that led me into, the political space, the court space at that time as well. We had a Senate inquiry, and I got to know quite a few other politicians who have either stepped out and come back in again, like Cory Bernardi, George Christensen, and a few others. And through that, I ended up with a large platform. During the same-sex marriage campaign, I advocated for same-sex couples to have full legal rights. But I said, if we change or redefine words like marriage, we're going to end up with a lot of difficulties in this country as a result. And that video, or 2 videos, went quite viral, millions of views each. And obviously that's proven to be exactly the case. We've redefined the word marriage. Now we've also redefined the word woman, and apparently a woman can have a penis. And we've also called children mature minors who can apparently consent to, they can't consent to tattoos or getting married or driving vehicles, but they can consent to really radical, extreme, harmful, irreversible, catastrophic damage to their bodies. So as a result, I've been advocating for women's sex-based rights, child safeguarding, and parental rights since about 2018 now.
You outrageous, horrible person. How dare you do that?
Terrible.
I mean, and I find that is a pretty serious indictment of where we're at, because 10, 15 years ago, that was normal. And I don't mean normal.
All of history.
That's right. But in the last 15 to 20 years, Australia and the Western world's gone off a complete lunatic cliff. And I'm not saying that there aren't people with gender dysphoria. I'm not saying that you gay, bi, straight, a monkey's uncle for all the rat's ass that I personally give. And and I'll be transparent. I didn't actually vote in the same-sex marriage vote because I really don't care. But at the time, I was heavily involved in what was then the Liberal Democratic Party. And they were the first political party in this country to advocate for the allowance of same-sex marriage. And as a party, that was one area where I'm probably not as committed to that space of the marital part. I think we should all arguably be equally miserable in marriage. But then I've already been married once, and it wasn't a great success. But in that same space, when we start redefining words and redefining logic, we're going from being, okay, fair and equitable to, are you fucking kidding me?
What
The
we've done
nonsense
is
is
remove
extreme.
all the safeguards, Dean. You know, like in 2013, Julia Gillard, the then Prime Minister, removed any definitions of male and female. Not that they were clearly defined, but what she did do was insert that anyone who identifies as a female is female and anyone who identifies as male is male, and removed any safeguards for sex-based protections. So basically, ideology has usurped reality here in law in Australia, and we have paid a huge price ever since. And it's really caused a lot of problems for women and children in particular as a result of that. And it doesn't really, you know, as you said, it doesn't matter where you are on the spectrum of whether, you know, left or right or religious or socioeconomic. It doesn't matter. This is just an issue about reality, and it's gone too far, and it's infringing on too many of our rights.
Absolutely. I fully support your right to identify as whatever you like, but I'm not participating in your imaginary games, and I'm certainly not allowing my children to participate in your imaginary games. And we've had a couple of things here, and I'm a little bit behind in some of my my local advocacy work. In the space, I'm due to have a meeting with the school. I was supposed to have it almost 4 weeks ago, but you know, family things, surgery for blah 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 blah, kind of slowed me down a little bit. But there's things in that space that are so wrong, and I don't care how you colour them in, how you dress them up, what you want to make them look like. They're wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, gender distress is very real. People suffer from gender distress, but people also suffer from eating disorders or depression or, you know, other mental health issues. And we never ever affirm those other issues. Yet for some ridiculous reason, we're saying to children, you've been born in the wrong body. We're saying to children, we're lying to children and deceiving them into thinking they can change their sex if they take these drugs, if they dress this particular way, if they change their name. And it's an outright lie. No human can change their sex. Our skeletal differences alone are massive, let alone the DNA that's written on every cell in our body, our reproductive system, our hormonal systems. Like it is so much more than skin deep, and we are not costumes, we're not stereotypes. There's just male and female, and that's it. And it is not compassionate and it is not kind to lie to these children and say that you've been born in the wrong body and you need to take these really harmful drugs to try and make your body match your mind. What we need to be doing is showing great compassion and helping them change their mind to match the reality and their body and their biological, what the evidence shows us.
And increasing that personal strength and self-esteem so that they can tackle those challenges. You know, I'm not a 6'4" black man. I'm terrible at basketball. No matter how much I'd like to identify as Michael Jordan, it's never going to happen. And we've just got to get that grip, and we can't feed this into the kids. Like you know, I don't know how old your kids are. I know you had a 21st the other day, which you didn't invite me to the party. I'm really upset about. But you know, look, I've got a 13-year-old boy. I've got a 15-year-old bonus girl in my life. I've got a bonus 9 or 10-year-old boy, and I've got a newborn daughter. So I've actually got my first daughter. She's 8 months old. So I've probably gone from already being relatively protective of this sort of stuff to going, what in the hell world are we going to live in, whereby not only is reality completely made up now, it's just we'll just come at whatever crap we want, but also on the other side of that, the women's rights of everything. You know, I don't care what color pretty dress I wear, as fetching as I would look. I cannot get into a sporting match with a woman and be a woman. It's wrong. It doesn't tick any boxes. It's just complete nonsense. And there's nothing worse than watching these people try and convince themselves that it's true. It's not.
Yeah. No, and here we are in Australia where every sporting body and, you know, Sports Australia and other organisations have all rejected the fact that there are concessions in the Sex Discrimination Act that if a male's strength, stamina or speed would create an unfair advantage for a woman, then women deserve sex-based sports, yet not one sporting organisation is willing or prepared to stand up for that. And so we're in this insane situation where there are males playing in female sports right throughout, like right across the spectrum, right throughout Australia. We're not allowed to name them. We're not allowed to identify them. We're not allowed to oppose them. You know, Ben Fordham recently had a show where on radio on 2GB where he said and had an anonymous tip off. He spoke to this person that those girls would be penalised if they objected to the males who are in the women's competition. Now, these girls don't consent. They don't want the men in their competitions, yet they're not allowed to do anything. Yet, Dean, you and I saw in the Olympics, Imran Khalif, a man punching women in the head, calling it sport because he said he identified as a female and he had a female passport. We've seen William Leah Thomas, you know, the 6-foot-something swimmer, you know, up against Riley Gaines. Paula Scanlon said that he would pull out his penis every opportunity he got in the change room. We've seen Gavin Laurel Hubbard in the weightlifting identify as a female. We see the miserable looks on the women's faces. So around the world, this is happening a lot. But those men are allowed to be named, identified, and there's debate going on about whether or not they should be in women's sport. But here in Australia, you do that, you'll end up like me. I have to go now to the Supreme Court in a couple of weeks because I've been ordered to pay $95,000 in damages for identifying males in female sport. And mind you, the way I identified these males, I didn't go looking for them. It was on Football New South Wales websites. It was on local football websites in the public domain. But because I reshared it, because I undertook some political advocacy, I'm now being made an example of and being punished for it.
I saw that result come out, mate. And I mean, look, what I guess is not common knowledge is we actually kind of share a lawyer. Your lawyer's a friend of mine. And anytime I've been in trouble, which happens on occasion, he's my first phone call. And I'm happy enough to sort of say that I think he's brilliant. Not just as a lawyer, as a human, he's a brilliant human. And anything we disagree on, we've always sort of just navigated in around because we shoot straight. That's one of the key tenements to all this sort of stuff. But I saw that come up.
Kyle Katasi, we're allowed to say his name. He's fabulous, Solve Legal in New South Wales, has been really a great champion for me. We've been working on this issue for 3 years now, and it really just boggles the mind that we even end up in court to have these conversations, because if those men were actually women, we wouldn't be in court. There would be no court case because there's nothing wrong with women playing sport in women's sport. There is a big problem with men in women's sport, but our government and our political system, the judicial system, are doing everything they can to make sure that us women are gaslit and are silenced and not challenge these ridiculous policies.
And they're also the same governments and same bureaucracies and same authority figures who get on the TV every 15 minutes spouting about domestic violence and that, men are dangerous and toxic masculinity and all this absolute bullshit. I'm not saying some blokes aren't horrible, but, that's just humans. There's some horrible humans and there's some fantastic humans. But that same hypocrisy just oozes through these people, and they sit there and they bang on about all these things while they let gold medal domestic violence go on. And it's not on. I've done an awful lot of unisex sport over the years. Like we've run, I was actually involved in some soccer competitions. I know they like to call it football now, but I'm old. But, and we ran some, male and female mixed competitions, but they were advertised as mixed competitions. There was a certain amount of balance. There was a certain amount of rules. There was also a bit of an unwritten rule back in those days, and we're probably talking 10 years ago, where, without being funny, if somebody had smashed one of the girls aggressively, somebody else would have grabbed so-and-so and sorted it out. And it's probably a little old school, probably doesn't tick any current boxes, but you didn't have to worry too much about it because we'd protect our women. And the women who were participating were safe because nobody was, accidents would happen, of course, but nobody went out of their ways. And, look, they were also playing with consent. They knew they were playing in a mixed team
Whereas the girls today, many of them are under the age of 18, up against fully grown adult males, and they're not playing with consent. They don't want to do it, but they're not getting other options. So there's a massive difference there.
Oh, it's a huge difference. I mean, and those same hypocritical organisations, the ones who crap on about consent all the time, like they're not the biggest thieves of consent on planet Earth. And this is a perfect highlight for it. I sponsored an MMA, an Australian MMA female fighter a few years ago. I threw her some dollars she was competing at a world championship level, and it was just realistically, I don't think there was any direct benefit for what I was doing. But we've got an Australian woman who's, literally at world champion level in cage fighting. Here's some money. If I can help, that'd be great. But I went and saw her train. I've been to, the gym that she was using in Sydney. And I just visited. I've done some, we've got some videos and whatever, all that sort of fun stuff. But now she would beat the living shit out of me in a boxing match with boxing rules, with whatever, because I'm not a boxer per se. I'm not an MMA fighter. But she's at world championship level, and I could, without a shadow of a doubt, know full well that if I got hold of her and did this, that's a different thing altogether. That's not fair, and it's not competitive, and it's not sport, and it would be completely wrong. But here we've got blokes who know how to box or MMA fight. They're training for this stuff. I've been in a few pub fights in my time, but, that's a different thing altogether. You're looking at these people who are showing up at the Olympic Games to pretend that they're women and then beat the living shit out of them for a gold medal that they have no business doing. And that cuts across on all these different sporting outcomes. That comes across with all these different things. It's disgusting and it's wrong. And I'm happy enough for my little girl as she gets older to play lots of sport. But the first bloke that's in a game with her, we're going to have a pretty serious problem. And I'm not shy about pulling them up, and I don't care who I offend. I think what you're doing in this space is amazing. I saw the result, obviously, between following you online, following Kyle online, and keeping up generally with these sort of things. I saw that result come out. My head just about blew off my neck. I think you probably saw the video I made afterwards. I was so cranky, it's not funny. It was disgusting.
Yeah. It's really mind-boggling, and we are appealing it. We're going to the New South Wales Supreme Court to appeal that decision. But what, breaks my heart the most is that I speak to so many of these girls who, have made the sacrifices since they were 5, 6 years old to, go to training, to kick a ball around the backyard, to eat well, to go to bed early, to, as they've gotten older, spend whole weekends, playing representative games. These girls are now in, either just under or are semi-professional. It's the pathway to becoming a state or federal, national representative. And they're just having, to be put in these situations where they're humiliated, where they lose opportunities, where they risk potential injury, where they have men in their change rooms, and they have no recourse. And they're being told by their own sporting organisations that if they speak out, that they could face the same legal action that I have. They're being gaslit into being told that trans women are women. Well, they're not. The only qualification to be a trans woman, I don't like the word, is to be a male. But only men are trans women. There's no woman on earth who's a trans woman because we're women. Like, it is absolutely ridiculous that we've thrown our brain cells out to appease some of these men. Many of them, not all, but generally these men have, very heightened sexual fetishes, autogynephilia, and they want to dominate women in public. And this is how they do it. And it's really offensive. It's really scary. And these girls are told, just forfeit or just self-exclude. And it's really heartbreaking that these young girls have all this pressure to be the ones to solve it when it's the adults in the room that should be standing up and doing something about this. Because these young girls, especially the ones under 18, they're children. They're literally children. It shouldn't be on their shoulders. They're being told if they forfeit, they will be expelled from the competitions or they will be penalised. And so many of them do just self-exclude. So here we are in Australia, the greatest sporting nation on earth. And,
Once upon a time,
our girls are saying, no, I'm not going to play sport because I might have to go up against a guy and it's unfair and it's unsafe. And that just, it's utterly heartbreaking, Dean.
It's heartbreaking and it's embarrassing. These young girls, like I said, I've got a 15-year-old who's quite an athletic young lady. She's not playing soccer, and I know that I guess the one that blew up for you with this court case was soccer or football, whatever they want to call it.
It's happening in netball and tennis
It's happening across the board. And, I'm not going to cop that. I get it. We're out here in the country. I'm not sure geographically. Like, we're in a pretty small area where mixed sports happens until you're sort of at that 12, 13, 14 years, and then they start to have to really separate them out, which makes sense because, one, you don't have enough kids. Two, you got to make up teams to make it work. And there's not those massive differences until they kind of get into that age group of that 13, 14, where the girls usually mature that little bit earlier, so they've got that little bit of an advantage. But as soon as that starts to come up, it comes up like a freight train. It comes up really, really quickly. And I look at my 13-year-old next to the 15-year-old girl, 13-year-old boy, and give him 12 months. He's due for a growth spurt. And at the moment, if I was putting money on it, she'd beat his ass. But 12 months' time, that's not going to be a viable thing, like even in a fun context of kids wrestling, fighting, playing sports, whatever the case may be. It's not going to take much.
We saw a couple of years ago that it's happened both with the US teams and the Australian women's team. Like, the full adult women have played against the 15 and 16-year-old boys teams and they've been smashed. Like, they can't even compete against teenage boys. I think of my beautiful friend, Deborah Ackerson. She is one of Australia's most successful ever athletes, competed in 5 Commonwealth Games, 2 Olympics, has won gold, silver and bronze medals in weightlifting. And, she says she goes into the gym and she's so deflated.
I'm assuming she doesn't have a penis. Just checking, just for clarity.
Not have a penis.
She does not have a penis. That's fantastic.
And yet, 15, 16-year-old boys can come in and lift the same weights that she can lift. And she did have to face off with Laurel Hubbard. It was her 5th Commonwealth Games. She'd already competed as well. So that's 20 years of competing, Dean, to do 5 consecutive Commonwealth Games, 2 Olympics. She was one of the breakout in women's weightlifting, one of the inaugural competitors. And her entire Commonwealth Games in Brisbane a couple of years ago, when that was on, was dominated by a man, Laurel Hubbard, who competed. He ended up getting injured and didn't finish. But, Deb should have been celebrated. Every single person in Australia should know her name. She's greater than Kieran Perkins and Ian Thorpe and all these others. She's achieved far more than they ever will. And we don't know her name, but most of us know Gavin Laurel Hubbard because he's a bloke who was competing in the women's competition. It's just disgusting.
It's wrong, isn't it? Like, it couldn't be more wrong. Like, I don't know how these people. I can understand people with mental illness thinking that's a good idea. I think I'm a woman. I'm going to go do it because we already know you've got a bit of a mental illness, and I'm not saying that to be an ass. And I know a lot of people who watch some of my stuff go, "Oh shit, he shoots pretty straight." But it is a psychological disorder. And in some cases it can be quite harmless. Some cases it can be quite mild. Some cases it can be whatever, right? Every horse is different in a race. But these people who are so over the top with it that they want to invade women's bathroom spaces, invade women's sports, invade, every private area that should be safe for women to be in, there's something significantly wrong with their outlook on life, whether that's suitable or not, and whether or not I'm going to have some lunatic call me names next week. I couldn't give a shit. But the fact that this is where we're at, and then we've got governing bodies and authorities that are now signing off on it to the point that bloke can compete. It's not really a competition, and it's not fair because men and women are different. I don't know. You don't need to go to uni to do a degree in biology to know men and women are significantly different. It's real basic stuff.
We have male and female competitions in the first place. If we're all the same, then we wouldn't even have the male and female divisions, but we do. And, the really interesting ththing is I mentioned Julia Gillard. There's no sex-based protections in the Sex Discrimination Act. The Sex Discrimination commissioner can't define the word sex, can't define the word woman. We've got, and she gets over $400,000 a year of taxpayer money, mind you. And we also have,
it's very expensive to be an idiot.
Then we have the federal and all the state ministers for women. Not one of them can define the word woman. Like, what are we doing?
Whether they can or are they? It's not so much that they can't; they won't.
Correct.
They're not brave enough to. They're not willing to.
Statement: anyone who identifies as a woman is a woman. What does that actually mean? And 99% of Australians know what a woman is and know what a man is. And these political elites, they're lunatics. I don't know how they sleep at night. I don't know how they look at themselves in the mirror when they say
because they've got $400,000 a year going into their bank account for being dumbasses. That's how they sleep at night. So, all right, well, just for fun, define a woman.
A woman has XS chromosomes and, a female reproductive system with her hormonal systems that support that. Her pelvis is a different shape to a man's. I could go on and on and on, but the very basic definition is an adult human female. And a female, her whole body is geared at the production of eggs. Our gametes are eggs for a male. Your whole system is geared around the production of sperm. And so that's what sets us apart. Now, yes, there are intersex people or people with differences of sexual disorders. But what that usually means in nearly every case, mind you, it is that they are a male with some female sex characteristics or female with some male characteristics. And so that's a biological reality. It's a very complex and difficult situation for people to navigate. My heart really goes out to them. And that's, they've got really important decisions, medical decisions to make alongside their health teams. But what I'm dealing with is this transgender ideology where a man who is aroused at the thought of being a woman or dominating women says he's a woman and wants to impose on my space. I'm also greatly concerned about the young women who want to identify out of being female because they've been sexually assaulted, they're autistic, or they've seen the aggressive, harmful pornography that is so rife at the moment, and they're going, I don't want to be sexualized. I don't want to identify as a woman, so therefore I will identify as male. Now, that's a bit of a generalization, but it's a generalization because it's true, because the majority of girls who are identifying as blokes are unsafe and traumatized in some way. Whereas the blokes, they've gone down these rabbit holes of pornography. They've gone down the rabbit holes of being sexually aroused at the thought of being a woman. And it's a very different scenario. And then we've got the little kids whose parents are absolute nutcases and have told their kids, you're born in the wrong body. We will enforce the stereotype that if you're a boy and you like pink, you must be a girl. Like, how nuts is that? Dean, you and I grew up at a time where we dismantled all the stereotypes and we said, girls can be tomboys, girls can be anything. And if boys want to put on a tutu, let them.
Well, that was the whole, they wanted equality. That was kind of when it landed. But now the equality's just gone to retardation and it makes no logical sense. And, when I see those parents, and look, the celebrities all seem to think it's the coolest thing in the world to have just statistically speaking, and as people like to remind me when it's budget night and I put out a video on that I'm not an economist. No shit. I can still count, I can still read, and I can still comprehend. But
you still have to pay tax, so it's important.
And I don't pay tax. I have tax stolen from me, is how I like to describe that. But like when you're doing all these things and you're looking at these celebrities and you're looking at the percentages of these celebrities, whether they actors, singers, dancers, politicians, all these people with public profiles who have an inordinate amount of my child's trans, it's fucking out of control. It's just malarkey. There's not a possibility that as a percentage all these children are gender dysphoric unless they're being absolutely brainwashed by dickhead parents. There's no, maybe they're just being supportive. No, they're dickheads and they are absolutely destroying their children's lives. And I don't even know how to fill the jars with these people fast enough. It's disgusting.
Yeah, look, these parents are, trying to meet their own needs. They're not looking after the needs of their children. And it is really traumatic, really difficult to think that they could be so harmful to their own children. And then we also have, such a large cohort of parents who are trying to do the right thing by their gender distressed children, and the schools and the medical practitioners are intervening and removing those children from their parents' care and having their way with them in ways that, just make your mind blown. We wrote a book called Devastated: How Gender Ideology is Tearing Australian Families Apart, because it is so rife, Dean, like, as you said, you've got these celebrities, you've got this cohort, it's not huge, but there is a cohort of parents who think it's trendy, who think it's, tolerant and inclusive and wonderful, to affirm your child.
The people who follow these celebrities, let's be fair, they're the type of people who, oh, well, Charlize Theron, she's just amazing. Oh, wow, she's got 3 transgender children. I'd better do that as well. And
yeah, and it's ridiculous. Children have to be imaginative and playful. You've got a little one. When mine are 18, 21, and 22, but when they were little, they pretended to be dogs or astronauts or cowboys. It's great. Like, they should play and be imaginative, but you never affirm those things. I didn't put microchips in them because they thought they were a dog. Like, we don't.
You didn't train the child up in the backyard and beat it with a stick every time it'd bark. That's not what you do.
Feed it dog food. I'm not going to do that because I love my child and I will enjoy the play. I might call them Rover for, the afternoon while they pretend that they're a dog, but they're not a dog. They're my baby. They're my child, and that's how I treat them. Yet these parents who then go, oh, Billy likes pink, Billy likes dresses, Billy must actually be a girl, and Billy was born in the wrong body. That's the ultimate in cruelty, Dean, because that poor child is going to grow up so confused and not protected by the people in their lives that they should be able to rely upon. But then, as I said, you've got this whole other group of parents who are doing the right things, taking their children to psychiatrists or to the hospital when they're feeling very distressed. And the hospital is now calling these parents transphobic or bigoted or, not competent carers because they refuse to affirm the child's delusion and distress. And we also know there's doctors like Dr. Gillian Spencer and Dr. Andrew Amos who have lost their jobs or lost the ability to meet face-to-face with patients because they've said, these puberty blockers are chemical castration drugs. These puberty blockers are causing irreversible harm, and we need to discuss it. And instead, APRA shut them down and say, you can't even see patients, and you're banned from social media posts. You're banned from talking about these things. So we're in dire straits here in this country, and we need the brave people like Gillian Spencer and Andrew Amos and others to keep speaking out, because literally people's lives are at risk, and the amount of detransitioners are growing, and the amount of harm that has been done to these people is absolutely heartbreaking.
And you couldn't be more correct. And I look at it and I go, look, if you're a consenting adult and you choose to go and do whatever you want to your body, as long as you're a consenting adult doing so, I don't care. I honestly couldn't give 2 shits. If you want to go and cut your bits off or, get more piercings than I would or more tattoo, it just doesn't matter to me. But when you're starting to inflict this shit upon children's, where I get really, really, I'm beyond fed up. We all know that. I've made no secret of how fed up I am with the complete bullshit. And kids need to be left alone. They don't deserve it. Your psychological problems should not be your children's. The government and their proxies' psychological problems should not be forced upon children. But do you suspect, and I'm sure you probably do, that this whole war against toxic masculinity has enabled these elements to become so much more pervasive than what they probably were in previous generations? Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, look, and I think it's a perfect storm of so many different things. There has been a long, slow march throughout all of the institutions when it comes to Marxist and socialist type doctrine that wants to dismantle the family. And the family unit ideally has a strong male head of the family or leader of the family who protects and provides and goes forth for the family, the mother who nurtures and also protects and provides for her family, and then the children who are able to trust their parents. And so this dismantling of the family starts with claiming that all men have toxic masculinity, which is absolutely insane. We need men to be masculine. We need the firefighters, the police, or whoever it is, in every way to protect the more vulnerable members of our society. And then, yes, we have children growing up going, well, I don't fit this stereotype or that stereotype. I must be the opposite sex. And all of a sudden, they get celebrated, they get promoted, they get protected, in their environments. And, the boys who are growing up to be great men are suddenly going, what is going on here? And it's very confusing. The messages that are being given, they're getting penalized, while those who are being lied and deceived to and are promoting the lies and deception are the ones being celebrated and protected.
It's getting harder and harder. I've got a young man here who's 13 now. Look, he's probably in an unusual position because his dad is the way his dad is, and that's a pro and a con. And some people go, no, that's the best thing in the world. Others would go, that's the worst thing in the world. There are pros and cons to it, because I'm watching a 13-year-old wrestle with the fact that his dad is moderately well known. His mates watch my videos, for better or for worse. I know they're all supposed to be banned, but we all know that didn't work. But there's this element of, and there's another element of it with him as he's growing into a man, where he is becoming aggressive at times, and I've got to try and temper that with, no, mate, it's not toxic for you to be that way, but you've got to learn how to control these things. You can't just, and there are consequences too, and there are actions, and there's pros and cons, and you've got to learn how to protect your sister, your stepsister, your stepmum, your mum, your nana. Yeah, that's our role as men on a day-to-day basis, is to be strong and capable to protect. It's a well-known fact that child predators avoid children with strong dads. Did you see that or hear that ABC interview from 1975 that John Adam released? John Adam's an economist, fairly clever. I've met him a couple of times, really, really great guy. But he released this, he came across this pedestry interview about 1975 on ABC radio, where the host basically starts it by saying, if you don't like it, tune out. And then they went down this, and it was about 30 minutes, and I tried not to vomit the whole length of. I was fuming, and they were these people were talking about how these little boys, but we can, because we've got more money, we can buy them things and we can treat them better. And the host actually says to the guy, or one of the guys, do you think the parents knew? Oh, well, we suspected that maybe mum had a bit of an idea, but dad had no idea at all. And I'm thinking that's because dad would have beat the living shit out of you people, and rightly so. That's what dads are designed to do. That's what we're supposed to do. And in 1975, they released that ABC interview. Of course, they tried to ban it, and they tried to have it recouped in the courtrooms. And John was, harassed and harangued a bit like yourself, all to protect this shit that violates children. And that's where I've just done my lolly. I'm just so over all of it that, again, I don't care what any consenting adult does. I do not care about your sexuality. I don't care if you're gay, you're straight, whatever, but I do. As soon as you start involving children, they're not allowed to go and buy beer. They're not allowed to smoke cigarettes. They're not allowed to apparently have the internet anymore.
I can't even cross the road without a lollipop, lady.
It's madness. It's madness. They're so over mollycoddled in all these ways. But when it comes to this little space, here, go and chop your penis off. That'll be a good idea because you like the color pink.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Madness.
It's crazy. And I hear what you're saying about adults, but what the problem is, again, when we grew up, there there were what I would call sexually perverted men who they call themselves transvestites or transsexuals. A lot of them even contact me today and say they agree with me 100% and that children should never be exposed to these things. But they also didn't insist that we call them women and that they have access to all of our spaces. Everybody knew that they were men. Everybody accepted that there was a small group of men. You know, when I grew up, they were all hanging around King's Cross and other places like that. And it was like,
they went into an environment that was suitable and kind of appropriate
100%.
for that whole caper.
Yeah, it wasn't imposed on society as a whole. But now we all have to buy into this lie and deception that these men are actually women. No, they are not, and we will not buy into it. And women need sex-based spaces, whether it's bathrooms, sport. You know, my friend Sal Grover finds out this week, you know, from the federal court what they're going to decide about, you know, can she exclude men from her female-only app? Now, of course, she should be able to do that. She should be able to have an app where women can connect for jobs, for flatmates, for lesbians, for dating, whatever it is. And yet, you know, there's a group of men who just are so angry about women having these spaces that they insist that they are now women. And it's never true. There's not one person on earth who thinks it's true. They don't even believe it's true. And yet, you know, the courts are imposing this sort of nonsense.
Telling us that we've got to buy into this complete bullshit. And I don't know Sal Grover, but I have had a bit of a look at that case for the last, I don't know, as long as it's been going on. And, you know, I wish her all the best in that. And that other lunatic bloke can obviously bash that entire argument fair up his ass. It's complete gibbering nonsense and it needs to stop. When I blew up on my video after seeing your result, now I don't know what you're going to be able to tell the folks, the people, about your court case that went on, but I think the publicly known stuff is that obviously there was some people that you didn't identify them; they were already kind of identified. You just certainly made your feelings known, however you felt appropriate. But you stood in front of a judge. You were dragged in front of a judge. Now, a federal judge, I believe.
No, these were magistrates. We've been at the local court.
Okay, so you're going to the federal judge next. Yeah. Okay.
Supreme Court next. The New South Wales Supreme Court is next.
So you stood in front of a judge, and I think in the video I played the game of, well, I'm going to call you a man / a woman and just muck around with you because you guys can do make believe, I can do make believe. But you had to stand up and explain this very basic biological reality that these men are playing women's sports and you don't agree with it, and effectively this is unacceptable. And a judge could look you in the eye and fine you, was it $95,000 or $98,000?
$95,000. It's not a fine. I've got to pay them damages for $95,000. As you said, it's two different men. They play in two different sporting teams, but they're women's only competitions. You know, I had to go to court and swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, but I was also really hassled in court to call these men she, her, miss, which I refused to do because I just wanted to tell the truth. They are men. They were already identified by Football New South Wales and their own football clubs. Their images and names were already online. I simply took screenshots and reshared those things. And I asked, why are men in women's sporting competitions? I posted those photos. I posted screenshots of from those, you know, Football New South Wales websites. We had, you know, I am the spokeswoman for Binary, which exists to politically lobby these things. We had 12,000 emails sent to Football Australia and Football New South Wales asking this question, and not once did those football associations engage with the policy discussion. They went straight to the police. They had me shut down and they've dragged me through the courts. So you're obviously not saying this, but I'll say this. Fuck Football New South Wales and Football Australia for being spineless, gutless cowards and endorsing this sort of malarkey and bullshit. So, right, what did the judge say? And how did the judge look at you square in the face with a serious look on their head going, Miss Smith, Mr. Kirralie, I'm assuming some sort of, I'm finding you. How the hell can they do that? What did it look like from your end? I was in New Zealand. I wasn't in the courtroom.
You were in the courtroom. So I was just Kyle there himself. I can imagine the look on Kyle's face would have been impressive.
Yeah, you'll have to talk to Kyle about that, and I can't comment on everything that was said. There are court documents that the public can read, but look, yeah. I mean, just mind blowing. That's all I can say.
If a judge, a member of the judiciary, somebody who allegedly our society entrusts with making decisions of significance, is so fucking deluded that they can't tell the difference between a man and a woman, and think that somebody who can tell the difference between a man and a woman needs to be paying damages of $95,000. And wasn't there a threat there that it doubled if you didn't pay it straight up? With a threat of doubling that number, that judge should have absolutely every decision they've made for their entire career, one overturned, two retried and investigated, just to work out just how completely deluded, how removed from reality that judge was. That judge should be disbarred at a minimum. And then we work our way back through there. And that means if that person has put murderers in jail, if that person has issued a traffic fine, every single one of those things should be turned over and based on reality either retried under a judge who can tell the difference between boys and girls. Otherwise, there's just no credibility left in that entire judiciary system. None. How do you do that?
It's very complicated, as I said, because the legislation only provides protection for people who identify as. So I don't know, how tied their hands are, but the legislation does not provide protections for me, for women to be able to advocate for ourselves, to be able to draw boundaries and say no to men in our spaces. And that's why Sal Grover's in court. That's why I'm in court. That's why Jasmine Sussex, a breastfeeding expert of 20 years, is in court, because she said men can't breastfeed. We all know these things to be factual and true, but the legislation does not support us. And so we're in just such this crazy situation where I don't know how or why the courts are making the decisions they are, other than they are saying that it's because that's what the legislation says. They're saying that it's vilification for me to call them males or to call them out as males, that Sal's discriminated against males because she says no to them on her female app. That Jasmine Sussex, she's going through for vilification as well, for calling out men who breastfeed. It's just such a ludicrous situation that doesn't pass the pub test. No Australian just walking down the street would think this is a great idea. Yet, for some reason, our political animals have very little, if no, appetite to change this, other than, Pauline Hanson's been a great supporter. She has even sent out emails helping me fundraise, as has Malcolm Roberts. So One Nation have been great. The Libertarians have been great. John Ruddock is just a massive champion in this area. We've got some nationals, actually. My local member, Alison Penfold, she's just been outstanding. She took from grassroots right through to the federal platform for the Nationals a policy that sex needs to get put back in the Sex Discrimination Act, and she's going to follow through with that by trying to put forward a bill. We all know that the Greens and Labor will block it. But good on her, good on Bridget McKenzie, and
got to fight that fight. They have to fight that fight, and they need to come out. And you're right. I mean, I haven't met Pauline, but I've met Malcolm Roberts, great guy. I know John Ruddock really well. I have no doubt John will end up doing a little episode of this with me at some point. But these people are elected to fight, and any of them that are in there and aren't fighting, I want to take to task, because that's, if they're just going to sign up to any nonsense and bullshit, I want my $300,000 a year back that you people are getting, because you're all overpaid. We all know you're overpaid. I'm not saying it's an easy job, but you're all overpaid, you politicians. You get paid far too much for what you contribute, and you do far too much damage for what you're contributing. And this is the right up in that wind of why it's problematic, is you're here fighting like a champion for something that's really, really basic. The fact this is even a topic of discussion is idiocy.
It's insane.
Not from
And
your
I
perspective.
really
You're great.
want to mention Alex Antic and Jacinta Price and Claire Chandler as well in this, because they have all tried really hard to, persuade their parties and persuade the parliament to do something about it. Now, they've just been lone voices in the wilderness so far, but I strongly believe the pendulum will swing, because you can't create laws that defy nature and expect them to stand. Like, it's only going to be a matter of time. They just deny reality, deny nature, deny science, reject evidence. So it's not going to go on forever, it's just not. And we're seeing around the world, in the UK, the US, and other countries, where the pendulum has swung back or is swinging back, and children are starting to be protected. They're banning puberty blockers. They're not allowing males in female sport. President Trump has said there will be no males in female sport at the next Olympics. Sucked in, if you are, that is basically what he said. So we know that the pendulum is swinging. We're just, us and Canada, some people call it Tranada, are so far behind, but it's only a matter of time. It is only a matter of time, because we've got reality on our side.
Thank goodness for that. But like, I'm sure you do. You talk to a lot of young people. As you said, you got 20 to 18, 21-year-olds in your household. How are most of their friendship groups? Because I mean, that I have a feeling that's about where the cutoff is, and the real problem. So I'm 45. I'm somewhere between 20 and 40 is this little generation that are so broken and so confused by all this shit. Yeah. Are you finding that your kids are towards the end of that, where all their mates are going, that's all bullshit and nonsense? Because I know my kids, the 15, 13, 12-year-olds, are all kind of going, well, that seems dumb. Yeah. I'm going, you're right. It is. Congratulations. Well done. You're smarter than the average politician in Australia.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I think a lot of under 25-year-olds in particular, they are much more conservative than most of Australia. They are just reality-based. They've seen all the nonsense, and they're just going, well, what are the facts? What's true? What can I see with my own two eyes? And what's real? And we're finding it is that 25 to 35-year-old bracket in particular that have been very captured. They went through the everyone gets a trophy stage. They went through, all of this nonsense of tolerance and inclusion, and it just hasn't worked out well for them at all, or for the ones who come behind them. And particularly kids at school these days, where, there is Wear It Purple Day, Rainbow Days, Ida Hobbit Days, you name it, it goes on and on. And they're seeing that these kids who identify as an animal or the opposite sex have so many more privileges and protections. They don't have to wear school uniform. They don't even have to go to class. They get celebrated, with special assemblies. And most kids are just going, what is this? This is just nonsense. It's
I can pretend to be a dog as well. Do I get the day off?
Exactly. So, as I said, the pendulum is definitely swinging. Young people are definitely waking up. Unfortunately, many of the university class were so captured with, I believe a lot of lecturers who probably don't even have kids yet are gunning for our kids. And, they've come up with these insane ideologies. They don't want to be challenged. They shut us all down. I think of the doctors I mentioned earlier. Medicine is meant to be an area that's very rigorous and studied and has data and evidence.
Don't question the science. Don't question the science. Right. We saw that in the last,
100%. But the fact that they can't have these discussions shows you that the other side don't have the evidence. They don't have the reality. They don't have the truth. They don't have the data to support it. We do. And so all they've got is bullying and gaslighting. Well, it's not going to work much longer, because there's too many of us standing up and saying, no, this far, no further. You can threaten me. You can take me to court. You can do all of these things. It will not change the fact that a man cannot be a woman. Like, a man is not a woman. Doesn't change the facts. Do whatever you like to me. You still will be a man. That's that.
That is that. And, that you've just hit the nail on the head. So I've always been pretty outspoken. I've always been, I guess, aggressively outspoken. The last 2 to 3 years, I've even taken the handbrakes off how previously, not conservative, but I've been a lot more polite over the last, say, 5 to 10 years relative to all these discussion points. Now I quite literally, as soon as they start screaming, benching at me, I just go, listen, go and fuck yourself. I do not care. You have no say. I've never been afraid of being cancelled, but now when they bring it up, I actually relish it because I like telling them to fuck off. You are a deluded idiot. I'm not afraid of you. You can't cancel me. You can't sack me from my job. You can't do any of that bullshit. You can try. It can't be done. And the more people in that space that we're seeing emerge, there's been, you've been around 2011. I think I ran my first political campaign as a candidate around 2011, 2012, somewhere around that time. There's that, our generation, I guess, of people who have been in this space. But now there's all these young kids and blokes coming up, this Sam Bamford, this Big Chocky, these other interesting guys. And I don't know their background. I don't know them. But I'm loving watching them come through saying exactly what they think, how they think. Whether you agree with them on everything or not is completely irrelevant. The fact they're coming out brave enough to say it and they're happy enough to tell that screaming, banshee mob that have absolutely obliterated everybody for the last 15 to 20 years to go fuck themselves. I don't know how deep in faith you are or anything, if my language is whatever, but,
You have the freedom to do and say what you like, Dean. I don't want to take away your freedom or impose myself on your freedoms.
No.
That's my choice. That's the freedom I have. So
exactly right. But I'm the position you've taken to say, let's do it, bring it. Now, of course, people get a little bit confused when it comes into that space, and they go, "Oh, you're a champion," and I'm sure your Facebook pages are similar to mine. With you're the best, bro. I love you, which is really nice, of course. But you've got this organisation binary, and it is important that people can do various things to contribute to that, because nice things being said in comments on Facebook does help feed the algorithm. It does get more eyes on products. Sharing always matters for sure. But lawyers don't work for free. As wonderful as Kyle is, and I know he's not an extortion artist by any stretch of the imagination, he still has to get paid for the work that he puts in. He's got teams. He's got people. These things cost money. So fighting these wars costs money. Whether it's a case of, that's it. And whether it's a case of throwing $5 a month at binary, that'll help. Whether it's signing those petitions you guys push out. I told my aunt that sort of lives very, very close proximity. We talk almost every day, that I was talking to you tonight for this program. She said, I got an email from her and I signed her petition. She's great. And I went, good job. Well done. Yeah. Those little things help. Is there any particular place that we should be directing people at? Anything that you particularly want to push people towards to understand? And how long before you're back in front of a judge? What are the likely outcomes, and how in the world do you want to tackle that?
Yeah, look, 25th and 26th of May, I'll be in the New South Wales Supreme Court. So come along if you want. Send me a message of encouragement, whatever you want to do there. We are definitely always fundraising at binary.org.au. We have legal bills to cover. We don't know how long or how high this will go. So we're making sure that we've always got money in the kitty to, and Kyle's not the biggest expense here. It's the barristers and silks that we have to employ to represent me in court, plus court costs, plus all the rest of it. But we are also, as an organisation, still campaigning. We're planning on putting some full-page ads in national newspapers this month as well. We've got the Victorian state election coming up that we will no doubt, be putting some content out there around, because they are the most restrictive state in Australia. There's a few things on.
They're borderline psychotic down there. There's a lot wrong with Victoria.
Absolutely. And I am working with people like George Christensen and John Ruddick when it comes to petitions. There's the Canberra Declaration. We're doing some things in Parliament houses. I'm constantly lobbying politicians and trying to give them the support they need, because it's all about the numbers. And if they understand how many people are opposed to the current policies, they will act. But people have to sign these petitions for us to go and present them to the politicians. They need to be writing letters. They need to be picking up the phone. They need to be taking action and speaking about this all the time. And the amount of Australians who don't know that I am in court, or that Sal Grover has this case called Tickle v. Giggle, or that Jasmine Sussex is in court, or Lyle Shelton. There's so many of us, but the amount of Australians that don't know because our media won't report on it is insane. So it's got to be up to people like you and your viewers, Dean, who share this content and make others aware, so that we can really build the momentum to get the change that we need. So we have a massive campaign going on at the moment to get sex into law, into the Sex Discrimination Act, and until that happens, many more are going to face complications like I have.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not going anywhere anytime quick. And look, no, I guess that's why I'm leaning back into the long form thing on occasion. Like I'm in this funny little bubble where I've ended up with a little bit of a following and a little bit of influence in some spaces, and which is funny because I was a political candidate. I think I've done 7 campaigns as a candidate and got about 12 votes. But, for years and years and years, and now the pendulum's swinging really aggressively. But because I guess I've done that for so long, I've got a little bit of, I guess, a perspective that I can dive straight in. I'm already battle hardened and battle ready in that sort of space, as are you. And I'm guessing Sal Grover, I don't know much about her history, but I have a feeling she's had the gloves on before, and she's been more than happy to take on a few idiot events. So.
Kind of, not really. She's just a mum with a little 3-year-old who had this idea for an app. She came out of the actual Hollywood Me Too movement. She was a screenwriter who saw what was going on there and came back to Australia quite wounded, and just felt, well, hey, how cool will it be for women to have their own space online? And wow. She's literally a mum with a single mum, little bub, and this is what she has to deal with. But she is so articulate and so strong and so formidable in this fight that every Australian needs to send Sal Grover a thank you.
Absolutely. I had no idea. As I said, I don't pretend to know about people I don't know about. I've seen the case. Yeah. The few things I've seen her tweet out or whatever have been pretty good. I just assumed she could box. In the proverbial political space, and we do need more people coming through with this and this long form content. Obviously we're going to roll out the clips and we're going to do all that sort of stuff. And if 5 people get on there and send some money to Binary, great. If 5 people share it, great. If and that's a simple movement that rolls forward and rolls forward and rolls forward. You do a newsletter, I believe. Is that?
Yeah, weekly email. We keep everyone up to date. I write blogs, several blogs a week, on particularly in the gender space and how it affects and impacts Australians. Sometimes we do things from overseas, but every week I will send out an email, sometimes 2 when we're doing campaigns or raising money. We have tens of thousands. It's well over 50,000, sometimes over 100,000 that we're sending emails to. So, and then we do coordinate campaigns. As I said, we had 12,000 emails sent to Football Australia back in the day. That happens quite often with political campaigns and with different organisations that we mobilise to get some action, because we are stronger together. Numbers do matter. And my organisation, it's not just me, I'm the spokeswoman for the organisation. There's a whole team behind me who do phenomenal work and make sure that we are constantly moving forward and we will get the change that we need.
Oh, look, there's definitely some of us who are, good at that figurehead, go out and lead with the chin. And then there's some people who are far better, not just from a skill set, but some people's personality-wise are just better suited to sort of supporting in the background and all that sort of thing. And that's important that they do get the acknowledgement and know how valuable they are. And have you had any thoughts about being a political candidate? And is there a party that you'd particularly run with? I know there's probably a few parties you like, a bit like myself, but...
Sure. I have been in the past. I was with Australian Liberty Alliance and ran in the 2016 election for the Senate. Angry Anderson was my co-runner. He's a great guy. And then when Corey Bernardi started Australian Conservatives, I was on the leadership team for that. But obviously we didn't achieve what we wanted to achieve there. So I really feel called to Binary, and I feel that it's really important that I can work with any politician from any party who's on the same side. And that means, we've got Labor politicians like Greg Donnelly in New South Wales, Drew Hutton, the former Greens founder. I talk with him and he supports me. I support him, right through to, Pauline and One Nation. So I don't really care what political party you are with, but if you are prepared to recognize reality, I will support you. And we have a little saying, we can hurt you, we can harm you, we can ignore you, or we can help you, because we have that. We're gaining numbers and there's strength in numbers, so we can campaign and expose those who are willing to harm children, and we can support those who are willing to protect them.
Absolutely, and I can't think of anything better. I can't think of a more important role than protecting these children and giving them some sort of a future to enjoy and fight for and live in. And unfortunately, the world's been so mad for so long that it's. I'm hoping that we're coming through it. But look, the fact that one of the Greens founders is sitting there scratching his head, going, "What? I just want to save the whales. What happened?" The whole it used to be right and left. It was a spectrum, and it was you were one or you were the other, or whatever. But that whole thing's just flipped on its head. There's no rhyme nor reason with it anymore. There's reality's just gone so far from reality.
And self-preservation, like you said, they just want the paycheck. They're easily bought and sold. They have no conviction. And the ones that do have conviction, like Pauline and Malcolm, are getting the numbers, because that's what we want. We pay these people to do a job, and that job is to represent the voter, and they need to listen to us, which, so far Pauline and Malcolm seem to be doing, as do people like John and some of the Nationals and other members. So we really need to get behind them. The ones who are doing a good job, make sure you get behind them. Let them know what you think, support them, encourage them, get on there,
Yeah, absolutely.
Do all of that sort of stuff, because we need to embolden them to do the jobs they need to do. And
they need to feel braver in. Yeah, absolutely. They've got to feel braver in their advocacy. And the only way they're ever going to do that to potentially challenge their own parties is if they believe they've got enough support from the actual people to do so. There's no, they go in there, and if the only support they have is from their party heads and the bosses in the room, not the support of the public per se, they're always going to have, they're always going to be easily bought and sold. Principles are cheap in politics. We watch that every week. We could go through any single day and look at who's in there and who's not in there and who should be. And then you think somebody in there who's really, really good, and then you watch them make decisions and go, I'm still to this day, I'm convinced Peter Dutton was told to bomb that election.
He did a good job of it.
I did not think that man was capable of being as incompetent as he was through that election campaign. It just didn't seem natural to me.
They're operating under fear. They're not operating out of conviction.
Absolutely, and that's why they're getting routed left, right, and centre. I've never had Dutton on any sort of a pedestal, but all he had to do effectively was stick the 3 talking points at that last election and basically shut him.
Oppose the government. That's what they are called.
It's out of control, isn't it? It's just crazy. And so, look, all right, what's the plan for you going into this court case? What do you really, really need? Obviously, we're going to do liking. We're going to do sharing. We're going to try and do some fundraising. Have you got events coming up that people can participate in locally, or have you got branches? Have you got? I don't know much about.
I know, and from time to time, yes, I do events. Off camera, I said to you, and I'm happy to say, my son's getting married in a few weeks. My daughter just turned 21. 2 of my foster children are now adults and starting their own families. So I've got my little grandbabies that, not by blood, but through those relationships. So I've got a lot personally going on at the moment, which I am enjoying and thriving in, and really feeding my soul with family, because that's why I do this, Dean. Like, I'm here because I love family. I'm so committed to it. So I'm spending a lot of time with my own family and my own community at the moment. The second half of the year, there will be some events, some conferences that I'll speak at and attend. We will do some more things with parents. We'll do some more political advocacy. But, for this just, up until June, July, everything's about my family for me. And happy to do podcasts and talk to anyone, but I'm trying to stay home and do what I need to do.
And a foster mum. So is that a formal foster situation, or just one of the sort of families?
Yeah. I've had 5 foster kids altogether, but the 3 siblings, we had them when they were 3 and 4. They're now 26, 27, and all married. One's just had their second baby like 6 weeks ago, and one of them's about to have a baby in 3 weeks. So just love them so much. They're a part of my family. My kids call them their siblings. You know, we're very close, very tight knit, and so
that's a phenomenal sort of a circumstance, like, to do that. Like, you've got to be a pretty selfless person to take on other people's, and don't take this the wrong way, kids, but other people's mess, other people's confusion, other people's challenges. And you just go, come on in. She'll be right.
Oh, greatest joy in my life, Dean. Absolute greatest joy in my
life.
How
did you get into that? Was it trip fell over? Was that an active thing? That's nuts. I had no idea about that.
The first ones, well, my husband and I had a lot of trouble having kids. Took 4 years before we had our son. And so we just wanted to foster some kids and help them out. So we had a brother and sister for a little while. That one, they went off to someone else. And then in the church we were in, the opportunity came up to have these 3 kids. And we just jumped at that opportunity. We were able to form a great relationship with their mum as well. And that lasted for many, many years. But yeah, the kids have all stayed in our lives. And as I said, my kids call them their siblings and they call each other. My middle biological daughter lives with one of the foster sons and his wife and children, in another town, and they're all very, very close. And
that's phenomenal. That's fantastic. Really, really phenomenal. And that's a big part of why we're doing this. Like, I'm fighting this for my kids' future, for our kids' futures, for all that sort of thing. And to see you doing that, that's phenomenal. And you are a woman of faith, yes? You guys Absolutely. Are religious Christian.
I actually have a Bachelor of Theology from the Churches of Christ in New South Wales, but I never intended to use that to be a minister of a church or anything like that. We always wanted to work in the community, basically. My husband and I, we run a business. We've just had our 28th wedding anniversary. And, just marriage and family is so important to us. Faith is so important to us. My Christian values are the filter and dictate, everything I do and believe. I take it very seriously. It's very, it's who I am. and I'm proud of that. I'm not ashamed of that. Like I said, I mean, you can, again, like, I believe God's value is freedom. He gives you the freedom to choose or reject him and how you want to live. There's obviously consequences for all of us in the choices that we make. I want to come alongside people and share love, share life, share joy. They're the things that are most important to me. And so that's my commitment. And when these children, even these men who are taking me to court, I don't actually have any ill will towards them. I feel sorry for them because they've been lied to, they've been deceived, and they're not going to find freedom going down that path or being in that deception. And so to me, the Bible says, and everyone's heard this, whether you're a Christian or not, that the truth will set you free. And Jesus calls himself the truth, and the truth will set us free. So when we walk in the truth, there's freedom. When we walk in lies, it's complex, it's messy, people get hurt.
I think that's a phenomenal outlook on life. And it's amazing being of my persuasion and kind of going, I do get along really, really well with very, very committed Christians such as yourself, such as Kyle, such as da-da-da-da. But I think it's just because we do live in that truth, even if we
Absolutely.
I don't share that belief. I don't have that faith. And many, many people go, oh, but you should, and the work you're doing. I can't pretend to be somewhere I'm not, but I can quite comfortably go, I absolutely love the concept of the 10 Commandments. I think they're pretty solid rules. If you can live by them, I reckon you're going all right. Thou shalt not kill. Well, you know what? I don't need a book to tell me that that's probably not recommended or not the first port of call. I think there's some pretty good rules in there, and there's a lot to like about the Christian faith. I think as Australians, the more people that get it in their head that we are a Christian country. This country was only been around for a couple 100 years and some change, but it wasn't.
It was founded on the values and the principles, most definitely. I would not describe us as a Christian nation now. It's very secular, very multicultural, unfortunately, which never works. You can't have multi-cultures in one thing. We can have multi-ethnicities, but all the cultures don't mesh because there's cultural aspects from Islam and others that are anti our culture. But we were definitely founded on Judeo-Christian principles and ethics, like you said, the 10 Commandments, and it flourishes. Countries that are built on those ethics and remain on those ethics, they absolutely flourish. When there is totalitarianism, communism, socialism, Marxism, whatever ism you want to call it, Islamism, it removes freedoms, it removes human rights, it removes our ability to function as independent, strong, capable individuals and families. And so the only way to flourish is built on those Judeo-Christian ethics.
Yeah. Look, I couldn't agree with you more. And I just look at it and I go, look, strong individuals create strong families create strong communities, and that could be a football club or a church or a whatever. But those strong communities create strong countries, which then create strong societies that aren't in the cesspool of disaster that we're currently in. And I absolutely love champions like yourself. Even in the areas that we don't agree, the fact that you're so brave in front of it, and it is a big dragon to slay, and you're at the forefront of it, and you've been at the forefront of it for quite some time. It's heroic. Anybody who tells you that it's not heroic is either a deluded idiot or isn't reading the tea leaves, because without people like yourself going head first into those courtrooms, look, I always feel a hell of a lot better if I got to go into a courtroom and I've got Kyle standing nearby, and whoever he recommends is usually pretty good. I know a couple of really good lawyers and legal folks that are magic, but to have that bravery, which you clearly do, to have that conviction, which you clearly do, is sorely lacking in society, and we need more and more of it. We need people like you to continue your work, but continue it with growing support. I know from my little corner of the bubble, I went from doing videos that would get 500 people. I do an election and I got 150 something votes, not 150,000, 150 something votes in a by-election in Eden Monaro. And now I do a video and it gets 10,000 people look at it in an hour. It makes me go, oh, hang on a minute. I was on the right track back then. People are waking up. It wasn't that I was miles away from where I needed to be like you weren't. We were on the right track. We might not have been perfect, but we're on the right track. And now people are starting to go, hang on. The nonsense has gone too far. The silliness is outrageous. Where are our champions? Who's going to lead that? I actually take, and if I go through the comments of my Facebook now, quite a lot of people of faith come on there and talk religion. And we know you're not that way, but the work you're doing, and I often comment back on those particular posts saying, well, I really appreciate that. That tone. I appreciate that vibe. I appreciate where you're coming from in that space, because we need the strength. We need that unity. We need to be able to go, oh, okay, there are few differences here and there, but I need you to succeed in this war so that my daughter doesn't have to worry about playing Olympic sport against some bloke who's bigger than her dad in a dress.
But we just need it. I think it was Sal Grover again said, if you're willing and prepared to repeat the lie that a woman can have a penis, then we can't trust anything else you're going to say. For a civil society to actually function cohesively and to thrive, we have to have the same understanding of language and concepts. Otherwise, there's just confusion and division. And that's what we're seeing today, because there is all this confusion and division. A woman can't have a penis. A woman does not have a penis. And the word woman means an adult human female. But when that language is messed with and changed and distorted, we end up, with children on chemical castration drugs. This is the outcome, and it doesn't matter what it is. Or, this is probably very controversial to some, but, surrogacy might sound nice, but it's human trafficking. It's buying and selling human beings. And when we change the language of what's going on in our culture, it destroys the fabric of our society. And so to have a civil society, we don't have to agree on everything, but we need to have a common understanding of what the language means and what we're talking about when we're talking about it. And if we don't, and if we start censoring or penalizing speech or gaslighting people, then we have a big problem. And that's where we find ourselves today. And so I appreciate that you call me brave, and thank you for that, Dean. But I don't see it like that. I just go, this is just truth and reality. It's just what it is. It's not, I haven't sat down and, had these big philosophical thoughts. It's just, I'm a woman, you're a man. That's what it is. And I'm not going to be bullied into saying something that's not true.
The beauty of that, though, Kirralie, is that with you doing that, another 5 people are brave enough to do that. And then another 10 people, and then another 10, and then another 20, and then another 30. And then all of a sudden, that pendulum comes back and the nonsense sort of goes back into the background, where the blokes in dresses are more than welcome to be blokes in dresses in King's Cross, if that's still a place. As long as they're not hurting anybody, I don't really care. The women and children can enjoy safe spaces where they don't have to be afraid. The actual feminist code there of, yes, women should be equal, but they also should be safe and protected and loved. And it shouldn't be that controversial a thing to say, but it is. So I really appreciate your time. Appreciate you coming on, being the first guest with some fearless conversations. And I think you certainly tick all the boxes for that. Ladies and gentlemen, jump on. Give Kirralie a like. Do you have any other platforms other than Binary itself that you like people to check out?
Yeah, I'm on X, Kirralie S, capital S, and I'm on Instagram, and Facebook. So find us there, and you can sign up at binary.org.au, and you'll, stay in touch, because some of those platforms don't like us and try to get rid of us.
They go through phases. Yeah, they go through phases.
But if you subscribe to our email list, you will always stay up to date. So thank you so much for having me as your first guest. It's a great pleasure to speak with you, Dean.
Been a lot of fun, of course, and it's great sharing a platform with somebody who's done such great work for the country. So thank you very much. Have a great night. Everybody, ladies and gentlemen who are watching this program, follow Kirralie, support Kirralie, get onto it, do it now. No mucking around or I'll swear at you. I've been known to do that before. So look out for the next episode. I'll come up with a guest. I've got a few in mind. We've just got to sort of, again, book the times and get it rolling out. Kirralie Smith, you are an absolute Australian legend. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. You too.